Good day, everyone. Today is September 29th, and all over the world, people are observing World Heart Day. That is a focus on our heart conditions, what keeps us healthy, what protects us from heart disease. And I think in Trinidad and Tobago, and the wider Caribbean, in fact, heart disease is so prevalent. It is right up at the top. And for that reason, we at Caribbean Newsroom have dedicated 2 months from September 13th to November 14th as a focus on non-communicable diseases, including heart disease, diabetes, cancer, hypertension. We've been encouraging people to try to put in a few minutes of exercise every day. If you are aware of our social media sites, you can go and download an app, Step Up app, and that will help you count your steps, and you give yourself a target every day and say, I want to make 3,000 steps, 4,000 steps, 5,000. Some people are up to 10,000 and more. Today, because the focus is on heart disease, we've invited the Trinidad and Tobago Heart Foundation to join us and tell us a little more about the status of our population in terms of cardiovascular disease. And we have with us Dr. Pravinde Ramoutar, who is the Vice President of the TTHF. Welcome, Dr. Ramoutar.
Hi, good day.
Okay, you are a cardiologist, a specialist in that field. So as an executive member of the foundation and as a practicing cardiologist, I think you are eminently qualified to address all the kinds of issues dealing with the disease and as well as policy, I guess, in this particular field. Can you introduce yourself to our audience and the work of the TTHF?
Yeah, good day. Thanks for having us. Yes, I am the Vice President of the Trinidad and Tobago Heart Foundation. We are a non-profit organization that generally our aim is education about heart disease. We would have started this foundation years ago when information about heart disease was not readily available as it is now on the internet, and you can go on Google and YouTube. And there were few people who actually would have went ahead and had heart surgery abroad and returned to Trinidad. And we realized that there was a lot of misinformation, a lot of misgivings people had about getting treatment for heart disease and what it meant to live with heart disease. So it was meant as a forum for giving people education about heart disease. I have been a practicing cardiologist for probably 20 years and more. I've worked at the San Fernando General Hospital for my head of the department. I work at privately as well at SurgiMed and VMed clinics. I am a non-invasive cardiologist. I do a lot of the diagnostic work to diagnose people with heart disease. And then after we diagnose them, we now have to counsel them on how they are to live with heart disease. But the real task with heart disease is really prevention. You want to get people to live healthy so that they could delay and prevent heart disease from setting in. As you know, heart disease has been the leading cause of death in Trinidad and Tobago for the last 20 to 25 years. And it is not showing any signs of abating soon. In developed countries, the rates of heart disease is beginning to fall, but we have not seen that yet in Trinidad, in the Caribbean, in what we would call lower middle income countries as yet. So it is a growing pandemic that is affecting mainly lower and middle income countries currently.
In your 20 years of practice, what has struck you the most in terms of trends?
So initially, we would see a large young men coming in with very massive heart attacks. Nowadays, we are seeing a lot more smaller heart attacks happening, a greater variety of heart attacks. And now also, due to hindsight, we see a lot more people living with heart disease. So we see a lot more people with heart failure and cardiac arrhythmias, which is abnormalities of the heartbeat because of existing heart disease that they would have survived and be living with.
What do you think? Just last week, I had that experience of a friend, no idea that he was ill. Family turns up and sees him slumped in his chair, heart attack. And I don't know if we are reporting it more or if there's actually an increased incidence of massive heart attacks among young men. But if that is so, what do you say? Do you say it's the reporting or an actual increase? And what could be contributing to that?
Well, there are times when you would hear more reports of these heart attacks among young people. The reasons for it is that the risk factors are silent in that you feel well. You are unaware that you are living with the risk factors. The risk factors are being, the number one risk factor is high blood pressure, which is silent. And unless you go and check, you wouldn't know you have high blood pressure. And even if you do check, sometimes if it's the first time your blood pressure will be recorded as elevated, people would say, well, maybe it's stress, take it easy and downplay it. But you could be living with high blood pressure for years.
And there are no symptoms in those
And
cases.
no symptoms. Right? And the other risk factors would be diabetes and pre-diabetes and high cholesterol. And there are genetic components to all of these. So you could inherit the risk of getting hypertension, diabetes, high cholesterol, and you even having pre-hypertension or pre-diabetes puts you at increased risk. Combine that with reduced activity. Lots of people are now doing, sedentary jobs and not much physical activity. That increases your risk of getting heart disease. So very often men don't generally, go do that type of help-seeking behavior where they go to do the regular checkups and so on, unless something is bothering them. And then it has to be really bothering them for them to go and check. So lots of time you find men are living with disease unknown to them, and then something pops out of the blue and they get a massive heart attack.
So can I ask you to help the audience understand what actually is taking place in your body to create from what will create the high blood pressure and what will high blood pressure do in your system to result in a heart attack? And similarly with diabetes, because people don't tend to connect what causes diabetes and how does that work in your body to lead to a heart incident?
Right. So the diabetes, it's something known as insulin resistance. So your body produces insulin that is required to control your blood sugar levels. When you put on weight, you're inactive, the body develops insulin resistance, which means that the insulin that you are making is not working efficiently. What happens is then that the pancreas gland that is making the insulin is now working overtime to make more and more insulin, because out of the same quantity of insulin, you're getting less blood sugar control. So you're producing more insulin. So your pancreas gland is working overtime to produce more insulin to help bring your sugar under control. That condition of hyperinsulinemia in itself is associated with causing a rise in blood pressure and causing abnormalities of your cholesterol. So right there is a lifestyle component to it, inactivity, putting on weight, plus a genetic component to it. The high blood sugars are associated with having high blood lipids, and some of those lipid particles or cholesterol particles, They are responsible for causing clogging of your arteries. High blood pressure. What causes high blood pressure? There is a condition called vascular resistance. That means the blood that is flowing through your vessels. When you're younger, your vessels are very supple. They expand easily to accommodate the blood. The blood flows through very easily without much resistance. As you get older, your arteries get harder, they get stiffer, and the blood encounters much more resistance to flow, and the heart has to pump harder and more powerfully to push the blood. So, as a result of which, your blood pressure begins to rise. So, the increased force of the pressure on the lining of your arteries can cause damage to the lining of your arteries. And whenever you have damage, you have healing. Part of that healing can be the formation of the cholesterol plaque. Cholesterol gets underneath the damaged lining of the arteries and starts to build up. It creates a reaction, and that reaction causes a buildup of the plaque. Those plaques, as they develop and as they start to grow, when they are young, they are friable, they're easy to break open. So one of those small plaques breaks open, and when blood is flowing over this broken plaque, the blood recognizes that there is a breach in the wall, and to plug that leak triggers the formation of a clot. So a clot is formed, and that clot grows, and you go from having a small blockage, maybe a 15 or 20% blockage, to an 80, 90, or 100% blockage within a matter of 10 or 15 minutes. That blockage is what causes a heart attack.
Wow. So you have so succinctly explained what is often referred to as a complicated case. You know, when when people say, "Oh, this person has a complicated case," they mean multiple illnesses. They think, okay,
Yes.
you're diabetic, you have kidney problems, you have heart problems, but the connection and the fact that you can trace this to a single source, because of course the body is it's an integrated system, but it's not often described to help people understand why diabetes is a heart disease risk, right? And the clots and so on. You just hear you've got a clot. But if you have a clot, is there any symptom that one might experience?
Right. So when you have a blockage in the artery, you can get chest pain, which is called angina. And the chest pains are very variable. What is classically described in the textbooks as a crushing pain on the chest that radiates up to your jaw, goes up your arm, goes down from your shoulder, goes down to your left arm, occurs in some people. Some people have a vague, non-specific type of pain. Very often they mistake it for having acid reflux or stomach pain. Even just sometimes they have like a mild feeling of being unwell. They have nausea. Sometimes they might vomit, and they might think, well, it's something they ate. So there's a whole host of symptoms that you can get. But generally speaking, the symptoms would sort of arise like over a 15-minute period. If you're having pain all day, it's not likely to be a clot, but something that comes on and gradually worsens or intensifies over a 15 to 20-minute period. That is consistent with having a clot. And it's not on the surface of the skin. You can't put a finger and say, well, I'm feeling the pain here. It's somewhere deep inside.
So when that happens, you should just get yourself to emergency somewhere.
So if that is happening, generally also people tend to get a feeling something is wrong. They get a fright, something is happening. Yes, so if 15 minutes has passed and this pain is not abating, yes, then you need to go to an emergency room, get an ECG, and that is the first thing that will tell us that yes, you look as though you are having what is evolving into a heart attack.
So being as someone who is in the public health system, what do you do to ensure you get emergency treatment in such a situation? Because, you know, most people are afraid to go to the hospital. they feel they'll have to spend hours. They're not sure.
So even if you go to your private doctor, general practitioner, and he suspects that you're having a heart attack, he can start you on what we call antiplatelet therapies to inhibit the growth of that clot. Remember what happens, your body has its own mechanism for dissolving clots, which is why when a clot starts to develop, the body's mechanism for dissolving clot also kick in. So sometimes you can have a clot that grows and the body dissolves it and it goes away on its own. So after 15 minutes, your pain might go away. So the if we were to give you medication to inhibit that clot from growing, we will allow the blood supply to be maintained in adequate quantities to prevent death of muscle. When you have death of the muscle, that's a heart attack. So aspirin, clopidogrel,
I was just about to
prasugrel,
ask.
some of the drugs out there that you can use.
So I was just about to ask, is it still recommended that the first thing you do is take an aspirin while you're sorting out and waiting
Yes,
for even for the 15 minutes?
It is still recommended. It is still recommended that you take.
Is it a regular aspirin or baby aspirin?
So if it's the baby aspirin, you should take 4 at the same time. Or if it's an adult aspirin, you take 1. And you recommend you chew it. It will start to work faster.
Okay.
Don't swallow it. You chew it.
Okay. I mean, even that is news to me, that that you chew it. So, okay, as a precaution, people should always have a bottle of aspirin, one that is not expired.
That's right.
It's a common thing that you buy a bottle and you never use it. When the time you need it, it's expired and so on. Moving to the role of the TTHF, is there a role in its own lobbying, an advocacy role for policy positions? For example, I know there's been a lot of talk about trying to get government to tax tobacco products and alcohol at a higher level just as a disincentive so that people don't, they don't drink as much, don't smoke as much. We do have a law, rule regulations against public smoking. That is something that took effect since I think 2007, when there was a special heads of government meeting in Trinidad. And there's regular increase. But what happens when are taxes an efficient and effective way in Trinidad? Or is it that people just move to cheaper alcohol, which might be even more a higher content?
So it is a deterrent. Has been shown to be an effective deterrent in many other places, that if we tax it, and in the TTHF role in advocacy is that we do advocate for the sugar content to be reduced in drinks.
And that has happened. Has that happened? I remember one
It has happened
manufacturer.
in the schools, yes, with the drinks sold in the schools, yes. The sugar content
is that what? Is that
but that has been
small?
voluntary, not mandated by law or anything. But we have also been advocating for labeling so that the sugar content could be, and the salt content in the foods could be at front of package labeling so that consumers could be aware what they are getting in terms of the sugar content, in terms of the calorie content, and in terms of the salt content.
And the labeling would say what is the recommended and what is the actual content, so that people can decide this has more than the recommended.
Yes, and in terms of the percentage based on the daily recommended.
Do you find that people understand these labeling, these labels?
I don't think so. No, I don't think so. And I don't think people pay enough attention to the labels, and very often, they flashy advertising healthy or put fruit in it or fruit pulp or something, and people feel, well, okay, this has to be more healthy than the other drinks or the other products. But the sugar content is what is the problem. Sugar and the salt content in the food is what is the problem. And very often, we don't pay attention to that. It's very easy to say that a particular bread is a healthy bread because it has more grain content and that sort of thing, whole grain, those type of things. sell for marketing purposes. But overall, it doesn't help us to discriminate which is the better product.
Well, there is definitely some serious work to be done on public awareness in
Yes.
terms of how people understand things in a particular culture. That you really, and even the habit of reading labels, or when you're
Yes.
buying, do you just have the habit of reading to find out in order to make a choice? I'm not sure people make a distinction, for example, between drink and juice.
No, people don't, and that's again, a lot depends on economics. A lot of time, people have to go with the cheaper alternatives for economic reasons, but very often those cheap alternatives are just sugar, water, and coloring. You know,
And what kind of success have you had with things like the school feeding program, things like exercise in schools? For
okay,
example,
so
there are quite a number of schools that don't have playgrounds anymore, and I've heard teachers complain that when the children go out to exercise, it takes them long to settle down, so they don't want to do it, and it's becoming less and less a part of the curriculum.
well, I know it's becoming less and less part of the curriculum, and because there's a lot of emphasis on getting good grades academically. And very often the teachers think that the students not settling down, but I think the students at that age they have a lot of energy. They need to get they need to find ways and avenues to expend that energy. The success of a program is good is really when you see 20 to 40 years down the road when we see a reduction in new onset heart disease in young adults. We're talking about people in their 40s, 30s, and 40s. In Europe, Mexico, Spain, Portugal, for instance, they have started these programs where they have started. And Japan, 3 to 5 year old kids in school, they have gone in and they have started programs. And the aim is really to see the reduction
Down the road.
before adolescence. You need to get the children involved in activity. You need to get the children aware of the healthy eating practices and so on, because very children are product of their parents' environment. Um, and it's very difficult to change adults. It's easier to change children. And what they found by these interventions, the children go home and they educate their parents. And that is the more effective way of getting parents to change how they feed their children, how they provide for their children, for their meals, etc. And these are programs that the the American College of Cardiology, the European Society of Cardiology, they are encouraging countries now they need to do. We started a program with secondary schools. I would say Form 3, Form 4 students in conjunction with the FCB. We went to schools, 5 different areas, large groups of schools. We actually taught them about heart disease. We showed them how to do CPR, which was a big hit, how to save someone's life. Somebody getting a heart attack, they collapse in front of you. So we are about there empowering them, giving them some information. They could understand the disease. And by becoming more aware of this condition, very often they have grandparents and parents at home who have the condition, but they weren't aware what they could do to help influence in terms of the diet, in terms of the physical activity, etc., to
But
help ameliorate the disease.
I have seen firsthand how children influence families. Because I have heard, parents would say, this little boy just come and tell me I must stop smoking. But they say it with a kind of pride that their
Yeah.
child could use terms, cancer. I mean, it might be a little 5-year-old, and that, it shows that the child is alert. And there's a pride. And I feel that that point of intervention of getting to children, even from early childhood education, the early, 3 to 5 age group. My own children learned about the colors of food, red and green, and would go to the supermarket and they would take it out of my basket and say, "Mommy, this has green red coloring. No, you're not supposed to have that. This has fructose corn syrup. No, that's not good for you." And I think it is children are so eager to learn, and they're so eager to express it, and they teach their parents. And I might want something, but I will say, well, I'm too embarrassed to go against my child's. If my child knows better, how could I dare go eat that, right? So
Yes.
I think that point of intervention is a very powerful, as opposed to talking down to children and thinking they don't know. Very often it's the adults who don't know,
It's very
right?
true.
The adult will say, don't smoke, because they think they know more than children, but the children are capable of carrying a message. And I
Yes.
feel
So,
that a concerted effort by the Ministry of Education, which has so much access to children, and children who may come from homes that don't have those messages, whether they are well-to-do or not, the message is not communicated at home. It can be supplemented and bolstered through the schools.
yes.
Are you seeing that kind
I
of?
think also that we need to be culturally relevant. Very often we get diets that are prescribed that are not acceptable in our local environment with our cultural heritage and so on. And traditionally, I think doctors would have told people that you can't eat rice and you can't eat flour, and give people very little option about what they could eat. Now, they're not going to comply with a diet like that. You have to have things that are culturally relevant and culturally acceptable as well. And similarly, for the children, we are talking to children about eating healthy things, fruits and vegetables. And parents would tell you they give their children grapes and apples and bananas in their lunch kit and they bring it back home. They don't eat it because they are bombarded with all sorts of, advertisement for snacks, salty, unhealthy snacks or sweet snacks and cakes. And that's what they want because that is how we advertise things to them. So the cultural context is also very important.
And that is where it comes with having the confidence to stand up to the commercial interests.
Yes.
And that's a complex issue because we all know about campaign finance, the need for campaign finance reform, and then to stem that kind of influence. But talking about cultural relevance, we're coming up, I think, next month with one of the big days for calorie-rich day, Diwali,
Yes.
right? Mithai, sweets of all kinds, plenty roti and it's paratha with plenty oil and fried foods and so on. And I've been toying with this idea of trying to do that same kind of, menu, but in a low
Yes.
calorie form. Do you think that's something that people would be open to?
Yes, I think it would be. I think I've seen many of the more educated adults, etc., begin to adopt that sort of approach to the cultural menus. In that portion size is one, so the amount of rice you take, the amount of roti you take, and then the fiber content. Remember, fiber is very important to slow down the absorption of the sugar from the rice and the flour. So if the more fiber content you have, that helps.
And
Protein
and
content,
you
so
would
that
get
your
that
beans and
in,
your chana.
would you stay in a typical Diwali plate or leaf?
Mhm.
Would you get that fiber, say, from chana, shatain, mango, pumpkin,
Chana, chatain, bodhi,
bodhi?
yeah,
Those are
that
high
and the
fiber.
salad you will get the fiber in that. And the protein, you'll get it well from the chana, you'll get it from the curry.
Right?
Yeah.
So that'll be
Yeah.
dal, split peas,
hmm
yeah.
Yes.
So
So
we
yeah,
can break down
protein.
these dishes in terms
Yeah.
of nutritional content and also preparation in such a way and consumption to
Yes.
take it down from a plate that is X number, like 2,000, 2,000
Yes.
calories to down to 1,000 maybe, and show people how
Yeah.
it works, because I feel those are the missing links. It's one thing to tell people, cut this out, cut that out, but they don't really know how cutting that out adds up to, what does it add up to, and then what is the impact on my body if
Yeah.
I don't,
Yeah. Yeah.
or do.
Yeah. They don't understand it. That's why I think it has to be relevant. So the portion size is important. I think that all sorts of delicious things out there. You want to taste everything, but if you could have a very small amount of everything, enough to taste, without overdoing it, that's important. And then the old thing of portion exchanges that we used to have, where if you know you're going to eat some meat high afterwards, well, you have to make allowance for it by eating less of the carbohydrate up front.
Do
So
you eat that sweet a long time after you have your main meal, or does it make a difference how long after you have it?
it makes a difference. It makes a difference. The body has more time to adjust, and it has less sugar loading to work with.
Sorry.
Yeah, it has more time to absorb. If you have the same amount of calories over a longer period of time, the body is able to process it better than if you have a heavy carbohydrate load for the body to process over a shorter period of time. That's when you tend to have these spikes.
Okay. So I know that you have your limited time, but one area I'd like to touch before we close is, do we have any kind of data on what it costs to look after a patient with heart disease over the care period?
So locally, we don't have data, but so what we have is economic models and studies that shows that someone who has heart disease, who has to have recurrent hospital visits or clinic visits, cost of medication associated with it, as well as probably recurrent hospitalizations. Um, and if such a patient who gets timely treatment after a heart attack is prevented from having a big heart attack, it gets timely treatment, the 1 year cost of treatment for a heart patient would equate to the cost of putting in the infrastructure and resources needed to treat that patient. So in other words, you get a heart attack, the time frame is 90 minutes. Within 90 minutes, you get to the hospital and you get into a cath lab, and we open up that artery with a stent. You go home from hospital within 2 days. You don't spend 5 and 6 days in hospital. You're much better off. Your heart has not been damaged significantly because we saved the muscle. You have a good, strong heart. You're on medication to prevent another heart attack from coming on, as well as treating your risk factors. If if we hadn't done that and you had ended up with a weak heart and you had to have recurrent hospitalization, ongoing medical treatment, the cost of treating you for a year would have equated to what it would have cost us
And that
to have
one,
treated you with that for the acute heart attack by getting that stent for you.
and people are very often afraid of that big price in the situation of a heart attack, and are not
Yeah.
sure they can afford it.
Yeah.
But when you calculate the care over for the number of people who do have the disease, even though we don't have figure, I think we can safely say that we would save taxpayers money to a significant degree by prevention. And what it costs for prevention is really the cost of you looking after yourself.
Yes.
You taking the time to try to know what it is to eat right and to exercise right, and unless you have a genetic condition that predisposes you to heart disease, it really is in our hands.
Even if you have a genetic condition, you can help, because it's not purely genetic, it's genetic and environmental. So if you have a genetic predisposition to heart disease, Yes, exercising, eating healthy, knowing what your risk factors are. As you say, knowing your numbers. That's knowing your blood pressure, your blood sugar, your blood cholesterol levels. Would definitely help in delaying the onset of the disease
Yeah, and so that
and
is why it
allowing you
makes
to.
sense. That is why it makes sense to for policymakers to promote sport for children, exercise for children through the school system, through the community centers, through just community life, and also through the school feeding program where they can become attuned to interesting food. You know, children like interesting food, and create alternative taste patterns for their parents who say, "Oh, my child only wants chips. I have to get fries for them." You know, and the earlier you start to help them to taste other things, that is setting them up right. So I think individuals, but also policymakers, to have policies that promote prevention through early intervention with exercise and nutrition is, I think, what is likely to spear us down the road, having to spend that. Every year we are looking to increase the budget for healthcare. I'm not sure that we're increasing the budget for sport and for community facilities and so on that allows that. Also, an attitude that academic work, sitting down behind a computer or a book and so on, your children don't need that when they have exercise and they feel good and energized and have a bath and then come to sit down to read or, do their work.
But you see it, you'll see by the time the children are reaching close to SEA, well, they stop exercising.
Yeah, a lot of
close
times
to
the parents stop
close
them
to
from sports.
CXC.
They say, I have to stop
Yeah,
this. Mm-hmm.
you have to stop it. So then that's when you start to see the obesity beginning to set in. Where the prioritization now is the academics.
And that is a point of intervention for information for teachers, for principals, parents, and students. All right. So, Dr. Ramoutar, I really want to thank you for spending this time with us. I hope that we can continue this conversation at another time. I think we would like to partner with the foundation as a resource for getting messages out to people. And I wish everyone a heart healthy day and a new commitment to look after our health. Thank you very much.